Okay, so I'll get it started. Thank you, everyone. Good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are. Thank you, Angela, for hosting, and I want to thank the organizers. You know, these organizers are putting so many conferences every, I don't know, probably every 2, 3 months. I just saw the invite for submitting sessions for Data Minute, which is coming up in January. The last one was so successful, so thank you. It takes a lot of time. I don't know how they do this, but thank you again for doing this for all of us. Just organizing SQL Saturday once a year is a big deal for me. So let's get to the topic. I would, before I go ahead, I really appreciate your feedback. There is a feedback URL, or if you want to send it personally to me, I'm okay with it. But and good or bad, right? As you can say, I'm not young anymore. I know all gray, so I can take constructive feedback. I'm not going to cry. Plus, I have 3 children, so I'm used to getting feedback and some harsh ones too. Because this is only the second time I'm presenting this, so with your feedback, I can probably improve it. And when I present next time, um, there is no slide to this. It's all notebooks, and I'm using a software called Azure Data Studio. You can download this for free. And if you are not familiar with Notebook, if you are writing a notebook for first time, there's a lot of great sessions people have been giving all over the place about notebooks, why we should use notebook, what is the good use. So I'm not going to go there. But one thing you will see that there's something called kernel, and in this drop down you see all different kind of kernels. So if you are not familiar, if you are writing it for first time, if you open your Azure Data Studio, start a new notebook, choose your kernel, it will automatically download all the dependencies that it requires, so you do not have to do this manually. That's the good part. And if it needs update, it will automatically, it will prompt you, and you can do that. So I just want to make it clear so you are not lost into this, that what I'm using. I'm sure you probably saw the title and abstract. That's why you are here. And I thank you for joining. So let's get back to here. So I always try to talk about, why people should listen to this talk, right? Um, and what you expect to get out of this, or what I expect to show you in this 1 hour that we have. Um, so Microsoft has a lot of recommendations, right? You read documentation for different topics, and and Microsoft says, these are the best practices that we recommend, and all this. Now, if you have hundreds of servers, and it can be, on-premises SQL Server, Azure Virtual Machines, um, managed instance, you might be running in Windows or Linux. How do you know that all of your SQL Server state or your SQL Server engines are in compliance with those best practices that Microsoft recommend, right? And Microsoft had it in many places. People wrote their own tools. There are third-party tools that you can buy, and they will do some of the checks for you. But finally, Microsoft came up with this SQL Server Assessment, that you can do this across the all your SQL servers. And I have a, as you see here, what are the environments it gets supported with this. And the good part with this about this is, sometimes we all know, if you're working with SQL Server for a while, that yes, Microsoft might have a recommendation, but you have edge cases, right? That it doesn't fall into that. So now you need to divert from that. You need a exception. You need a modification of that rule to check, right? So it doesn't comply. The baseline doesn't work with all the time for all your environments. So you can do that too. As I put in here, you can set your own default rule. You can create your own. You can bring third-party rules. And when I say create your own, I'll show you some of the examples. You can create your rules not just by using T-SQL. You can use any .NET languages. Some of those are you can use. You can use JSON. You can use command lines, PowerShell, uh, and many other options you have. Uh, SQL Server 2008 is not supported. Hopefully, you are not using it. Some of you might be stuck, not your fault, but if you have that, you cannot use it. It supports 2012 and higher. Azure SQL Database is not supported yet. Azure SQL Database Managed Instance is supported, just so you know. One other thing I want to mention that most of the code that I'll be showing you, I did not write this from scratch. I want to make it very clear, and I put this in all of the notebooks that where I copied it from and then I modified it because I want to be absolutely clear, and give the credit to the where it belongs to. If you want to dive into a little bit more and give feedback, there are a couple of links to the GitHub that's being maintained by the product team. And they would really love your feedback. When I was preparing this talk for first time couple of months ago, I already submitted a couple of pull requests. Some of those already got merged. Some of those they are already still reviewing. So, product team is very interested to get feedback on this and make improvements. So if you explore this, start using it. If you see issues, please send feedback to them. And I have my contact at the end. If you want to give me feedback, or if you liked something, you didn't like it, you want me to add other things, let me know. All of these notebooks I already uploaded into my GitHub repo, and I can share that with the organizers. I'm not sure how that's going to work, but I'll I can show you at the end where you can grab all this. So these are a couple of the demos that I'll be doing. The second one, the quick start, I'm going to skip because whatever is in the second one is actually also included in the third one. The reason I put the second one here, if you just want to take a quick look about this, you don't have time, you don't want to do a deep dive, use the second one. But if you have time, you really want to use this, go to the third one. So let's start from the first one. And if you have any question, put in the chat. Angela is monitoring it. I'm also looking at it, so I can stop and answer your question. I just don't want to go with my own flow. And if you have a question, we'd rather answer that instead of me keep talking for the whole hour. So the first one is just looking at what are these rules that we are talking about, right? What are the things that get checked, just to get an idea. So what I did is these rule sets, you can get it in a CSV, or you can also get it in a JSON format. So I uploaded this into a SQL Server table, right, in my local database, just to get an idea of what we are talking about, right? And I'm using a named instance, SQL Server 2019. So there's 232 rules. So I already noticed that, the abstract that when I submitted, I actually updated this, but if you read the real abstract, you will see the number is less. Actually, it was 203. So they added a bunch more. So I have to update my abstract in Sessionize. So next time when I submit this. So there are 232 rules. We're just going to look at like top 5, right? What are these things, or what are the columns here? So every rule has an ID, and then there are different types of rules, right? And definition will be one that's probably for all kind of versions and all SKUs, but then there will be override for, say, like if you have a standard edition and it doesn't support more than this value, then those will be putting in an override. You can enable, disable it, and there are labels, warnings, critical information only. There's a display name. The good part is there's a description for all of these rules, and also a URL from Microsoft documentation. And then you have a scope, whether it's a database scope or a server scope. Does it support Windows, Linux? As you can see, this one only support Windows. These two are for Windows and Linux both. And again, these are on-premises, managed instance, and this one doesn't do for managed instance. And there's also some target versions you can see for all the rules. So what are the target types, right? One is a database, one is a server. There are a couple of null ones, and those are mostly override. And I also saw there are some typos into the CSV, so it doesn't get loaded properly. I already told them, and those will probably be fixed in the next iteration. This just showing you there is critical information and warning, the breakdown. So most of these are warnings, and there are 33 for information and 2 critical. This is looking at per platform. So there are a bunch of rules that are not applicable if you're using Linux. So make sure if you have a Linux environment, you know that these are not going to be applicable for you. These are editions. So Express, Standard, and Express is standard. Most of these you will see they will be override. So the on-premises one will be applicable for all, and there are override values for Express and Standard. And these are ParseSQL versions, right? So if it's for 11 means anything above 11 and above will be applicable, but there are a couple that are only applicable for newer ones. This is just some of those I find that very useful for me. Like a weak password, login is equal to password. I know there are T-SQLs that people wrote. You can find all this, but now you do not have to do anything, right? You can just run these rules across the board using CMS, which I'll show you, a management server, and then you can find all this, right? And this might not be your favorite. I just want to point out that I found this one's very useful for me. So I just put it here. Yeah, you can check latest CU, right? Where you are with the latest CU. If you need to patch some stuff that are not patched for a long time, you can find all those duplicate indexes, this common. And like I said, many of these you can find queries, but then for all these you have to have separate jobs or run those at regular interval. Now you do not have to do all this, right? Unused indexes, max memory setting, and all that. So that's just giving you an overview of what we are looking at, right? So let's dive into the demos. As I said, at the beginning, I copied this from here, from the GitHub, and then I modified this, for this talk. So you can go and download this and start from there if you want to. And these are written by Microsoft engineers and the product team. So there are 2 commandlets that you can use. And this comes with the SQL Server module. This is the minimum version that you need. Once you have this module, you will get this 2 command. Invoke Sql Assessment will do the assessment for you, and get SQL Assessment item if you want to see the rules. So for example, I want to see the rules that are related to trace flag, right? It will show you all the rules that are related to trace flag, or you can say, show me all the rules that is scoped for a server or is scoped for a database, right? And then you can pass that to Invoke Sql Assessment, and I'll have examples for that. So I just put some brief description of the 2 command. And if you click this, I make those URL, and it will take you straight to the Microsoft documentation page where you can get more details about what are the switches that you can use. So the first thing, you need to import module to make sure that you can use those 2 commands, right? Kernel is dead. What does that mean? I'm surprised. me see what happened when I run the first one. So when you run some of these commands or the assessment, you might see these two warning, right? And so I reached out to the product team. The reason you will get this, um, if your XP command shell is disabled, which you probably or you should if you don't need it. And Microsoft realized that people will not have this enabled in all their environments. So this is pretty much a code from the product team that I got a feedback that they're working on to run some of these assessments without using XP command shell. It is not still in out there, but they are aware of it. So if you see these two warnings, and if you really want to run this, you need to you can turn it on, run this, and make sure you turn it off, right? If that's your standard. So you need to decide that. So hopefully I do not have to restart everything. So let me run this and see what I'm. Okay, so let me close this and reopen this. Okay, good. But it did not do anything. Okay, so what we're doing here, get SQL instance, I'm getting my named instance name, and then I'm piping it to Invoke Sql Assessment, right? So it's doing at a server level. And you can do this in many different ways, right? As you can see, I put option 2, 3, 4, 5, right? I'm not going to run all this. They're all going to do it, do the same thing. You know, you can run the same command in different way. So I'm not going to read through all this, but as you can see here, there are some trace flags rules that I should enable. That's Microsoft's recommendation. There are some deprecated features, and I'm also running my SQL Server agent with the account that is not recommended by Microsoft. And these are the two warnings that I talked about because my XP command shell is disabled, so I get those. If I enable those, I will not get this. Okay, so let's move down here. If you have Azure virtual machines that running SQL Server, I put an example here how you can run this, right? So, this is you create a credential, and then you pass that credential with the public IP address for your VM, and then you can do Invoke SQL Assessment. I've tested this, it works. So I'm not going to run this right now, but just an example if you need to. Now, if you want to run an assessment on a database, you can also have multiple options, right? Here I'm giving a path to my worldwide importer, and then I'm doing an Invoke SQL Assessment. Here you get a database name in a variable, and then you can pass that. So let's try this option 2. This is going to do it against wide world importers database. And again, I'm not going to read all this, but as you can see, it gives you all kind of recommendations that that it checks against. Now, we can look at some of this, right, and see, if I had a warning in last 2 days. Uh, there is a max memory warning that if it calculates, it's saying that, 12,505 megabyte, but I have it 12,700, right? So let's change this and see what happens if I run this again. So let's change this into below the recommended value, right? So the recommended value is 12,500. I change it to 12,000. And now if we run the assessment again, we shouldn't be seeing this. So let's try that. Something is not right. So it actually ran the previous command. So let me run this again and see what happened. Yeah, it's still executing the older command. So now we should not be seeing the max memory alert because we changed it to under the recommended value. Yeah, as you can see, it's not there anymore, right? So once you fix something, it should, it should clear out. We just saw that. So these are a couple of other examples. If you want to run it against a single database, you can do that. And if you want to run it against all the databases in an instance, you can just say get SQL database. It will get all the database and pipe it to the Invoke Sql Assessment, right? This command will run it against all databases in this instance. So we talked about how can I look at the rules that apply to a certain object, right? Either it's a SQL server at a server level or a database level, right? So here I'm not running the assessment. I'm just saying get SQL assessment item. So, but my scope here is the SQL Server instance itself, not a database. So if I run this, it will show me all the rules that apply uh, to this, right? So, and we are not running the assessment in this case. It's just telling us what are the rules, you know, um, applied to this. So we are just saying get SQL assessment item, but not running the assessment itself. And you can do the same. So here I'm saying, give me the rules that only apply to master database, right? So you get all this, but again, you're not running it. And we can also pass this. So here, what I'm saying, give me the rules with a warning, right? So I'm not getting all the rules, only looking at the rules that the minimum CBID is a warning. And we saw that there was only two critical rules. So they are not probably at a database level um, uh, because here I'm passing a database. If I run this, there is no output, right? So those two are probably at a server level. I can also pass a category, right? So here I'm saying, show me all the rules that are applicable to or that are related to trace flag. So these are all the rules related to the trace flag. Um, And again, so there, you can pass a lot of switches here to check all this. Now, how do we run a specific rule, right? So I just want to run one rule, and this is the idea of a rule we saw before. I do not want to run anything else. And you saw that, so we are not getting anything here because it already probably comply with this, right? So I can also run just the backup rule. And we see that, some of this, because I didn't take backup, this is in my laptop purposely just for this, and it's showing that, we are not complying with some of the backup rules. Now I can get the assessment item and then pass it to the Invoke Sql Assessment. So I can get the rules and then also pass it to run those rules, right? So I can combine these two commands. This is another example. So here I'm running it interactively, right? But in your workplace, you probably want to save these results, right? So so you can do some query and see which one you want to tackle. And if you're running this on a weekly basis or a monthly basis, you want to see your progress, right? How many of this you are mitigating. So you can save those in a SQL Server table if you see this command. Write SQL table data. This command you can use also. I think DBA Tools has a different command for this. You can use either one if you want to. And you just pass the database name, schema name, and table name, right? And it will save it. So if we run this here, it will run the assessment and save it into this table. And you can have a timestamp, right? I already have a timestamp, so you can go back, in a and look at those. So if we now go to new query, results, and we can so as you can see that we just ran this, this is my time in Boston, so in East Coast. So it got saved here, right? And I also have some, some older ones that I ran. I was testing this day before yesterday, and some previous ones. And then I'll show you later on if we have time. You can do some aggregation and see the trend, whether you are going in the right direction or not. So you can do that. So these are all standard rules, right? That came, and I didn't do any changes. And as I talked about at the beginning, that this might not be enough for you, right? You might have to do some customization. So also on that GitHub page from Microsoft, there are some customization samples. So you might want to download that and look at what's possible, and so you do not have to start from scratch, right? You can get a template and you can work from there. So I'll show you a couple of these. Um, so we're just getting all the database name in a variable, and now I'm doing a full backup, right? I'm just checking this one rule. Now it says that last full backup is over 7 days old, right? So that's my rule. It says that we should have a full backup every 7 days, which is very reasonable. Now, just for an example, for some reason, if someone said, uh, I need to have full backup every 3 days for my databases, just as a hypothetical, how do we do that? So I'm just going to, get the path in a variable where I'll have my customization. So we look at this file, full backup override.json, right? So let's see what we have there. This is my rule name. I'm overriding and I'm setting the threshold to 3 days. Now I can say that, run the rule, but use this file, right? And I have override value of 3. As you see now, it's not using the standard rule. It's using my customization for 3 days. Now, to take it a little bit one step further, if I say, okay, all my databases are okay if I check against 7 days, but this one database, I want to have it for 3 days, right? You can add this to your override file. So let's look at that. How does it look? So I have the same file that I showed you before, except I put a filter here with the database name. And now if I run against that file, you see that all the databases are checked for 7 days, which is default, but Stack Overflow 2013 was checked against 3 days, right? So you can take it further. I think I showed you the max memory, but I can probably, let's look at that. Open file. The reason I actually have this one is, as you see here, I did not use the threshold here, right? I used the word recommended. How do you know that? So if you go to the rules that I loaded in the CSV, there is a column called threshold, but not every one has a hard-coded value for the threshold, right? Because the memory the memory will be calculated on the fly based on your server configuration, right? How much is your physical memory, how many core you have, and all that. You will see that there's a variable called recommended. That's how it gets set. So you have to be careful when you do customization that, in your name value pair, what you are using here, right? So not everyone will have thresholds. I just wanted to make that clear. We can also disable and enable rules, right, if we have to. So I'm just putting some of this stuff in a variable. I want to, there is a rule name TF634, and I want to disable that rule, right? Just for whatever reason. So let me run this first. As you see here, I disable this rule. Means it's not going to check anymore. And now if I want to disable all the trace flag rules, um, I'm using, so I should probably show you these files, that how I'm doing that. So the ID is a trace flag, override. I'm setting the enable to false. And if I want to just disable one file or just one rule, here I'm using the ID as the TF634. As you can see here, the ID is trace flag. That's a category, so that will cover anything under the trace flag. And that will disable everything. As you can see here, all the ones are false. Now I can do another thing. First I say disable all trace flag, and then I can enable only the one with the performance related one. So I can first run this file, and then I can do the enable performance and enable the one that's related to performance on the trace flag. So how does that file look like? So ID is performance, and I'm setting it to true. So you can do that, right? So you can first disable all, and then enable the one that with certain criteria if you need to. So if we run this, you'll see that there's a mixed match of true and false. How do we create our own rule? And they're called probes, and there are different types, right? This one is a T-SQL. You can do command shell, PowerShell. You can do the registry, WMI, even with a CLR. And all of these examples, I didn't write it myself. If you go to the GitHub page, you will see those. But let's look at the T-SQL one that we are most familiar with and see how they create a new one. So here it's saying that, if a file of a database, the free space is under certain threshold, we should get alerted, or it should check against that. And this is a rule was written from scratch. This didn't come with the Microsoft one. And of course, I'm not going to go through this. But in that example, you will see that in those examples, you will see the different languages, how you can create your own rules. And you can also set up versions, and what are the engine editions. You have to make sure that your query runs successfully against all these versions, and all these engine editions and all that, right? Otherwise, it will fail. So here it's saying, the free space should be at least 25%, right? And it's just an example. So if we run this, You see this now, this custom rule set, right? I do not have enough free space. I only have 14%, and the threshold is set to 25%. Now, once you create your own rule, you can also customize that. And what I mean by that, we saw that it was 25%, right? I can pass the ID of my own rule. I can override, and I can say I want to have 50% of free space. It's probably not ideal, but if I say I don't need 25% anymore, I'm happy with 10%, you can do that. So you can customize the rules that you wrote yourself. You can do that and check against those, right? So now if we make it 10% and run this again, we probably shouldn't see this, right? Because I have a now custom rule for T-SQL probe and custom rule threshold change, right? So we did change the threshold. So let's see. Yeah, we don't see that again, right? Because now it's checking against 10% and we have 14% free space. So you can do that. I'm not going to run through other type ones, but there are examples for each one. If you want to take a look, go ahead. Again, these are a couple of the links that I got most of the code from, and where you can get those rules that are written outside the standard set that comes from Microsoft. Now, you probably do not want to run this by hand, right? For each instance, that's probably not practical. And you probably have something called, central management server. If you do not know what it is, look it up, where you can register all your servers. You can have them in different groups like dev, QA, prod, integration, and underneath you can have subgroups, right? And CMS has many advantages. I'm not going to go there. You can run, you can query all your instances from one window and all that. So I also mixed up, mixed DBA tools a little bit here. I made it a URL. If you do not know what is DBA tools, please look it up. I highly recommend. This will make your life, a lot easier if you are an operational DBA. And even if you're a developer, nowadays, these two roles are, a little bit blurred, but take a look. So there is something called get DBA register server. Register server, this is a function in DBA tools that you can get. If you pass your CMS server name, and then you can also pass a group if you do not want to run this against all instances, and you might have different rule sets, right, that you want to run against dev, QA, and prod, integration, and whatnot. And then you can also pass a server name where you want to save your results, your database name and table name, and your schema name, right? And then you can run this. It will run the assessment against all the servers that qualifies of this group. And if you do not want to have a group, if you run it against all servers, just remove this. In my workplace, so I have a typo here. I should have said, expand this too. I'll fix it. You can move the results to archive table, and you can also purge the results based on your retention period, right? You probably want to do this if you're running this continuously, or if you schedule this. So I'm not going to run this, but you can take this and set it up in your environment. You probably have to do some, replace some of the values and, do whatever suits your needs. So now, so far what I've been showing you is all you have to write some code, right? Either PowerShell, T-SQL, and whatnot. Now, if any of you say, no, I do not want to do this, I just want to, just click, and run this. So you are in luck. Azure Data Studio also has something called extension. So this is a very lightweight tool uh, when you install it. And then there are extensions that are written by Microsoft and third-party extensions like Redgate, and also community members can write extensions. As you can see, I have extensions from Redgate. They are called VSIX files. You can download and then upload here. Now, Microsoft also has a extension called SQL Assessment. And this is still in preview. If you enable this extension, then you can do it, just within Azure Data Studio without writing any code or without using PowerShell. So let's look at that. So this is my default instance that we've been using. Now, if I double click this, this is your home page. Because of that extension, you will see something called SQL Assessment. Now, if I click here and minimize this just so we get some more space, as you can see here, I have Invoke Assessment. I have View Applicable Roles. I have these two grayed out right now. And you can go to GitHub page from the Microsoft, where you can get all the rules and what I've been talking about. And you can run assessment, which will run. But if you want to go to history and check the old assessments, you should be able to see it from here. So once you run this from here, you lose control of the scope. What do I mean by that? It will run against the server and all the databases. So here you do not have that control of I want to run it against one database, multiple database, or just the server itself at a server level scope. At a server scope, you do not have those. It will run again everything. And we can then, when we are looking at the result set, we have two filters, right? I can only look at the information warning or just the one that's critical. Also, I can select that I will only want to see what happened to one of the databases, or multiple database, or at a server level, right? You can do those. Now, as you can see, these two are grayed out before, but they are highlighted now because now we have a result set, so we can use this. So once this is finished, I'll show you some of these buttons that how you can use those, right? As you can see here, as it's doing now, I can, filter here. I can choose just the server or one or more databases, right? Also on the severity, I can look at those if I want to filter it here. Once I have this, anyone I choose, the good part is at the bottom of this, you see more details about this, right? Rule description, everyone has a link to the Microsoft documentation that you can see. You can also see the tags here for each rule. I can export this and you can just run this. And what this will do, if you have a database, you just select any database, or if you have one already created, just for this purpose, select that one, and it will actually insert everything in a table. It's same as the command that we ran before to save the result in a table. But if you're doing this from here, it gives you the T-SQL to save it. Sorry. Okay. I can also create a fancy HTML report and send it to this one I was testing yesterday, I believe. And as you can see, it's pretty neat, right? So, and you can, make a PDF, or, share it somewhere where others can take a look. Especially, I'm not a consultant, I'm a full-time. If you're consulting, you go to a new place, looking at a server for the first time, probably a good idea, right? Because sometimes people are hesitant to run some of the other tools that is been written by many of your community members. Some companies have strict guidelines that you cannot install those, but this is from Microsoft. Hopefully they shouldn't have an issue. You can run this and share it with them. While we are in the browser, I just want to show you that if you go to GitHub SQL Worldwide and SQL Assessment, I just uploaded this, as you can see, 1 hour ago. So I refreshed the repo. You can download everything from here if you want to play with this. We can also go to history, and as you can see, we just ran it. We have 344 warnings, we have 5 information, and if I click this, it will take me to the result set that we just ran, right? So in your history, if you have multiple ones, you can click those, and you should be able to see those. So that's pretty much I have here to show you. So let me close this. So one last thing that so this one, I've saved the results, from my all my runs into a table, right? So what can you do? Like, and this is not a not a full-fledged solution. I'm just trying you to I'm just telling you that you can may take it a little bit further. If you have hundreds of environments, you save these results, you can write some SSRS reports to show that your progress week by week. You can show your boss, right? Hey, 3 months ago we had so many warnings, so many things were not right, and what the team is doing, right? So you can show a graph that slowly these numbers are going down. So what I did here, I just uh, did a group by by just looking at the server level, how many information warning I have, and I got the date from the timestamp, right? So once you have it, Azure Data Studio have some built-in graphics, right? One of these is you can just hit this button chart, and then you can create some charts with this, right? If you want to, some of you are proficient in Power BI. You can easily create some some items that you can put in a dashboard, and then people can just refresh it in their own and see the progress over a period of time, how how you are fixing stuff. There is also another extension called Sendance. If you are not familiar, look it up. If you go to the extensions, if you type this here, this is pretty cool for visualization. I don't personally use it, but you can take that result set. You can create some of these graphs, and share it with your peers.